year. All right, man. Let's get to the main event. I thought this would be a fun idea. We'll see. This might end up being a terrible idea. It's going to make a lot of people mad. We are going to be drafting slash ranking the 16 head coaches in the Big 12. We're basically going to be doing kind of snake thing going back and forth. And this was based off of four things that we are doing these rankings and these draft part resume, part projection of how they're going to do in the future or even this season. And then also, three, I don't know if this is as dependent when we're talking about the Big 12, but kind of the program that you are at does matter. And the fourth thing, and the most important thing, we are going to be doing the eye test. And the eye test is what I believe and what I say goes. So, do you want do you want the first pick or do you want me to?
I'll take the first pick just because I want to make sure that I get my guy. So if we're ready to go, it's Kyle Whittingham at Utah. In my opinion, I've said this many times, I'll say it again. Kyle Whittingham is one of the five best coaches in college football, might even be one of the three best coaches in college football. The way that he commands the respect of that program, the way that he gets the most out of his players. He doesn't need 5-star kids. He can take 3 stars and turn them into future NFL players. He is one of the most underappreciated coaches. Utah was arguably the best team in the Pac 12 the last 3 to 5 seasons of the existence of that conference. He is going to be coming into the Big 12 as arguably the heavyweight favorite to win the conference. There's expectations to be doing so. There's expectations to be going the to the college football playoff this year. As long as he's able to do that, you're in very good hands. I'm taking Kyle Whittingham first overall, and I'm popping some champagne bubbly over it.
Kyle Whittingham, two-time Pac-12 champion. Those were back-to-back Pac-12 champions. I counted the 4 winning seasons in the Pac-12. I didn't know if I wanted to count in those Mountain West years. Just talking about the resume of him. Very good pick. Talking about just projections in the short term here. Utah, the preseason number 1 in the Big 12. But I actually had a different person at the top. And I don't know if I'm going to shock you with saying this name. And this is a lot of resume, but I also think it is also part projection. And it is the coach that says it's okay to drink and drive. Yes, I am talking about Mike Gundy. He has had 8 10-win seasons in the Big 12, one Big 12 championship. The year that Iowa State, my school, actually prevented a chance for Mike Gundy to go and play in the national championship game against LSU, and the powers at the SEC prevented that from happening. Mike Gundy actually has a slightly better winning percentage at Oklahoma State than Utah, and or excuse me, than Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Pardon me. And I just think last year I probably talked to a lot more Big 12 people last year, at least. So I was talking to you. And a lot of times we'll do these things where we talk about like other teams in the conference. And a lot of people were kind of saying Mike Gundy, Dabo Sweeney of the Big 12, out of touch, doesn't understand the transfer portal, doesn't want to deal with any of this NIL stuff. And they just went and they shocked the world and they went and played in the Big 12 championship game when no one was expecting them to do that. They got their butts kicked in that Big 12 championship game. They have a bunch of guys coming back this year. I don't know how I feel about Alan Bowman at the quarterback position, but this team is going to be competing for the Big 12 championship this year. And if you're just talking about resume and Mike Gundy overcoming the odds, I love him. I'm taking him number 2, and that's going to be our number 2 ranking for that.
And I think that's a really safe way to go. Someone who is so proven in that conference. Would not blame you one bit. With the third pick, I'm going to take someone who has really turned around a program. And you talk about being one of the worst college football programs in the country into one of the most slept on in the country. A team that has a really good quarterback coming back. And as long as he's healthy, sky's the limit for this team. I'm taking Lance Leopold from Kansas. He has turned this Jayhawks program from a joke of a program into one of the more respected teams in the conference. They are one of the 5 best teams in the Big 12, in my opinion. Jalen Daniels is a beast at quarterback. The only problem has been health for him. As long as he is healthy, this Kansas team is going to be 8 to 9 wins. They're going to be one of the hardest outs of any of the Big 12 contenders this year. Very big on Kansas, very big on Lance Leopold.
I had him 3-2. He is very much, and you'll find this out when your team plays them. They're a very smart team. They're a very smart
Yes.
team. They're not they can out athlete you at some positions, but they're mostly going to outsmart you. And Lance Leipold has done a very good job there. And kind of the recurring theme as you go down on the list with a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys are guys that could have taken bigger time jobs or to have the opportunity to take bigger time jobs in the future, but have stayed put with their current program. And one of these guys could be a coach in waiting with my fourth pick, could be a coach in waiting in a certain Big 10 school. When a older coach might be stepping down here in the next few years. And I'm talking about Chris Kleiman. The school I'm referencing is Iowa, by the way. He's an Iowa guy. Chris Kleiman, fourth pick, Kansas State. What can you say? The dude won the Big 12 in the year that where Max Duggan was basically giving up his life in that game. He has actually done like a relatively good job recruiting, and he has kind of taken off where Bill Snyder has went, and he has kind of kept that ship steady there as he has been going here. And again, Kansas State right now could be winning the Big 12. They could be the Big 12 representing the playoff, and they might even, if the schedule breaks their way a little bit, they could be even in in the college football playoff as an at-large team this year. So Chris Kleiman, that's my number 4. And before we get into your next pick, I kind of at the beginning, I kind of think it was we're going a little bit closer to chalk than I maybe thought. I had maybe like a top 6, and then after that, I kind of I feel like it gets a little crazy. So who do you got? Or I guess you can add any other Chris Kleiman thoughts you got, and then you can make your 5th pick.
No, I think you nailed it. Replacing Bill Snyder was always going to be a big task. There's been some ups and downs there, but he's got Kansas State right back into contention, which is where we saw them under Bill Snyder more often than not.
All right. Who do you got next?
For my next pick, I understand he's coming off a not great season, but Matt Campbell is still somebody that I really like leading my program. Iowa State, more often than not, is a very tough out. They've got a very quality team this year. I know that secondary is absolutely loaded, especially at the safety spot. If they're able to be a consistent team on both sides of the football, like I said, Matt Campbell is just a really underappreciated coach, someone that has really turned Iowa State into a very quality program over the last several years, a team that I think has been ranked more than a handful of times under him. I know that there was even some talk about him jumping over to the NFL a handful of times. So I take Matt Campbell here. I don't think that this is an overthink or an over or a reach or anything like that. He's a very good head coach, someone that deserves a little more love than he maybe does.
You took my guy.
I had a feeling I was going to snipe you.
Dan Campbell, actually, when he was doing his interview with the Detroit Lions, he was just saying Coach Campbell, thinking that they would think he was the guy from Iowa State, hoping to get a little bit of name recognition there. So that was a little bit of the NFL connection with Matt Campbell. It's kind of funny, too, because obviously I went to Iowa State fan, know a lot about Matt Campbell. And he's basically, if you take out the first year and the weird 2022 year, post all of the awesome guys that we had drafted leave, he's basically guaranteed 7-8 wins, and now like they went 7-5 last year. It's weird how the coaching carousel goes, where he wasn't as mentioned in as many job cycles this year, but he last season was his best job coaching. That was the best coaching job that he did it at Iowa State. They went 7-5. They had this whole gambling scandal that removed a lot of veteran players from the team before the season. They were playing an insane amount of freshmen. A bunch of guys that had never played before. They go 7-5. 2 of those losses are to Texas and Oklahoma, and they had an out-in-conference loss to Ohio and Iowa, and that team really turned it around last year. So Matt Campbell, this is where it's he could have it wouldn't have been too crazy for him to go 3. The thing that Iowa State really needs to work on is they've had pro players. They've developed them under Matt Campbell in every single position group except for offensive line. That is the area where they have struggled. If that is the thing that is preventing them from getting to those conversations where they are more of a definite perennial Big 12 contender as the conference moves into this new era. All right, I will do. I actually had Matt Campbell ranked below this guy. It's a little bit of a resume pick, and I don't know how you're going to react to this. So I'm going to go with number 6. I'm going to do the Gus Bus. I'm going to do Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn was a coach at Auburn for a very long time, took over after the Gene Chizik momentum, played a national championship game once upon a time, played in a second national championship game if you talk about the Peach Bowl that Auburn played against UCF, that UCF claims was their national championship in 2017. And Gus has been doing he hasn't done as much as like the winning as like Heupel or even Scott Frost before him, but it's not like he has been bad. He had like a few 9-win seasons the first few years at UCF. Last year they were in 6-7. This year they have KJ Jefferson, who you can make the argument is like one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks. You can make the argument he's the number 1 quarterback in the conference this year. Malzahn gets guys to UCF, and I really like the direction he's building there. So this is part resume for the stuff that he did at Auburn. And look at Auburn since he left. You know, they had the Brian Harsin experience. That was a horrible mess. And I think Hugh Freeze has the ship going in the right direction. And maybe Auburn just needs to hire gangsters. That's the only way that they can get their men's basketball program and their football program to go. But I'm going with the Gus Bus, Gus Malzahn for number 6.
And I love that selection. He was someone that I was taking a look at as well for right around this range. He's just, you know what you're getting with Gus Malzahn. You're getting a guy who can recruit really well, who can go ahead.
I'm going to add one more thing. So I started doing a gambling thing last year, and there's like stats where I'm actually going to flip to this preview book I have in front of me right now. There's like stats with UCF coming off of a bye where Gus Malzahn covers the spread. It's like a guaranteed bet to like cover the spread. If I get to it here in a second, I'm going to look who they play after a bye this year. So they play Colorado and West Virginia off buys this year. Just a little bit of a footnote, maybe set a reminder in your phone, bet UCF to cover the spread in those games. Do you know who they played coming off of a bye week last year and then almost made a huge upset? Oklahoma. They're like a 2-point. Yeah, they're like a 2-point conversion away from either sending the game to overtime or winning against the Oklahoma Sooners, who were a very good football team last year. So Gus Malzahn, very good prep guy too.
Yes, I think that I don't want to continue to say underappreciated over and over and over again, but like I said, you know what you're getting with Gus Malzahn. You're getting a very quality head coach. Are they contending for national championships? More often than not, no. You had that one Cinderella year at Auburn, but he's good. He is a good head coach. Next up for me, I'm really between 2 guys here. I'm going to go with the coach who has had more success recently, and that's Sonny Dykes over at TCU. Sonny turned around Cal before he took the job at TCU, and that's not easy to do. Cal is not known as a blue blood program in college football, period, let alone the Pac-12 when they were still there. Sonny Dykes is very, very quality. Then you look at, speaking of Cinderella runs, they go to the national championship game. They beat Michigan to be able to get there. Now, obviously, we don't talk about what happened when they got to the national championship game to play Georgia, because it turns out that you can only take a team that is not the most talented in college football so far before you run into a buzzsaw. But he's able to get the most out of his players. Last year, they have a losing season, but you would expect that to happen when you lose Max Duggan, when you lose Quentin Johnston. They lost some of their best players. I do anticipate that TCU is going to rebound this year. Now, a rebound could look like a 6-6 record, or it could be an 8-4 record before you go to any kind of bowl game. But they're closer to being a 7 to 8 win team than they are a 5-win team. They're one of those programs that I pretty much anticipate them to go bowling every year. Sonny Dykes is very, very good. He just had a lot that was going against him last year, but they're a better team than they were. I anticipate that TCU is going to be much improved. I don't know their schedule, so this would definitely be an assumption, but I would take them around 8 wins this year for Sonny Dykes by himself.
That 13-0 season is more, or I guess what was it? No, it was a 13-1 season before they lost to Georgia. Is more impressive of a job than any other coach on this list has done. The positive things for Sonny Dykes are the Cal stuff, you're right. They had like one of the best offenses in the country every year. They also had one of the worst defenses in the country every year.
Yep.
This is a pick. I had him slotted here at the 7th spot, but I was almost tempted to kind of like pull it back a little bit because I'm just thinking about projections. And it seemed like the TCU team last year was maybe going back to like some of those Cal teams where it's like the offense was above water, but the defense was falling apart a little bit. If he can keep that defense solid at TCU, he's going to have success, and that's kind of like the biggest question mark with him. I do have like the Phil Steele season preview thing. I was reading about TCU, and I was like, maybe I'm a little down on them. And then I read the thing. He's like, 9 of my models have them winning 9 wins this year. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong on him. So I don't know if he has another 9-win season this year. I mean, Sonny Dykes might be climbing up this list a little bit more. All right, let's get to my pick here. This is gonna be our number 8 guy on our list. The to finish off the top half here, and this is where you can get a little bit freaky with it. I am gonna get a little bit freaky with it. This could be someone that you could be having ranked at like 13. I don't know where you're gonna have him, but this is gonna be. I'm just gonna take a big swing here. I'm gonna go Dave Aranda at number 8. Dave Aranda, a few years ago, wins the Big 12, prevents my number 1 pick, Mike Gundy, from going to the college football playoff on a goal line stop there for the Baylor Bears. Last year was a season from hell for Baylor. It was a team that just did not have a lot of good personnel. They had offensive line issues. They had quarterback issues. Dave Aranda seems like he kind of like was being a little bit more managerial, a little bit more of a macro manager than a micromanager. This year, he seems like he's going to be taking more of the reins on the defensive side of the ball. They have a quarterback transfer who I believe is from Toledo, if my memory serves correct, that people are very much hyped on right now for the Baylor Bears. And this is a little bit of a projection pick plus the resume pick. And for whatever reason, it seems like Baylor, when you least expect them, they can kind of come out of nowhere and surprise a lot of teams. So this might be a little bit of a crazy pick here at number 8, but I'm going with Dave Aranda. Hopefully he has a bounce back year this year, and he might be climbing up this list here in the next few years if he does. If not, and Baylor kind of has another down year, he's going to be somebody's defensive coordinator a year from now. So Dave Aranda, number 8.
I love that. I actually was looking at this list and thought that I might be able to sneak him in maybe with my next pick or 2 picks from now and feel really good about it. But I like Dave Aranda a lot, and I like that you were comfortable taking him in the top half because it's easy to forget that season they had 2 years ago where they were absolute dynamite because they did have a bad season last year. But he's someone that I believe can get Baylor back to the prominence that they've had over the last 10 plus years. I know that Matt Rule absolutely caught lightning in a bottle with them and was able to take it to the NFL. I believe in Dave Aranda to be able to find very similar success on a year-to-year basis. That's a program I really like, so I like that pick a lot. Pick 9. This is another really interesting selection here. And they were not great last year. Their sleeper team this year, even though we're projecting them to still be towards the bottom, but I love what they got going on at quarterback, which is why I'm going to take Willie Fritz here from Houston. Donovan Smith is someone that I have seen talked about as one of the best kept secrets in college football. You're hoping that him alone can help carry this team, but Willie Fritz is a very quality coach. And as long as they are able to take that progression from last year's team and turn it into more wins, Willie Fritz feels like a really, really solid option here. But similar to what you said for Dave Aranda, this is kind of a projection pick as well because Houston is not expected to be this great program this year. But I do think that Willie Fritz is going to be someone that is going to be more successful than he is unsuccessful in his stint at Houston, no matter how long it is. I like him a lot to at least get this program back to bowl eligible this upcoming year. And again, if Donovan Smith is able to turn into the stud that a lot of people think he can be at quarterback, they're going to be a really tough out this year. At a worst case scenario, they're going to be a tough out.
Donovan Smith. I had Willie Fritz at this pick too. This is kind of crazy that we're having this similar of a board here. Donovan Smith, I believe it was his first start, redshirt freshman year, hosting a ranked Iowa State team coming in. He just absolutely lit up Iowa State, and I think Texas Tech. He was the one who's at Texas Tech, by the way. I think Texas Tech won the game on like a 60-yard field goal, which kind of crushed some hopes for that last year Brock Purdy team. So Donovan Smith, do not have good memories with him, but I do know how dangerous he can be at the quarterback position. The one maybe downside you want to say, because this is kind of a funny thing that people do whenever a coach moves somewhere, they just kind of look at the resume and they're like, how many games did you win? How consistent was it? You could say that, like, hey, if you take out the last 2 really good years at Tulane, like what kind of a coach is he? And it's like, well, if you add those 2 really good years in Tulane, you're like, well, dang, this guy in this new college football era really knows how to navigate things, really knows how to get talent into his school, and knows how to build it up from the ground floor. So I like that pick there, and I do think that was like probably one of the more savvy hires this offseason is Houston locking up Willie Fritz. And even if you would have not taken Willie Fritz here, I probably would have went with this next option if you didn't get him, because this is a coach that last year with the 10th pick, I'm going to take the coach that last year at Big 12 Media Days went to the media and said, you guys are all haters. You guys all have us last in the conference, and I'm going to go and I'm going to show you guys that this team is not a last place team. I was one of those people that was saying this team was going to win just about 2 games last year. And I'm talking about West Virginia, and I'm talking about their coach, Neil Brown, because this is a team that could be a sneaky dark horse to win the Big 12. There's maybe about 8 teams that could potentially win the Big 12 this year, but this is a team that came out of nowhere. They had a tough out of conference last year. They have an 8-4 regular season. They go ahead and win a bowl game. This is a guy that had a lot of success at Troy, multiple 10-win seasons at Troy. And the weird thing with him is if West Virginia had a more functional athletic department and athletic program, he probably wouldn't have been the head coach last year. And I think that's just kind of more of a sign with all of these teams that want to fire the coach, get him out of here, let's pay the buyout, and let's get the next guy in. Sometimes it's okay to be patient and wait, because sometimes you're going to have seasons like Neil Brown had last year where it looks like all arrows are pointing up for West Virginia right now.
That's a really good pick. And I can tell you, as we were going through this, he just kept slipping and slipping, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, we're going to piss off a lot of West Virginia fans because he is a really good head coach. And not only did they have a bowl win last year, they won the Duke's Mayo Bowl, which is a pretty decent bowl, and they beat North Carolina, which is a pretty decent program. He is a very, very good head coach, and I'm excited to see what they can do this year with what might be one of the best running football teams in the entire country. They've got a quarterback who can run. They got several running backs they like. They could absolutely control time of possession this upcoming year and win a lot of football games once again. They're
Absolutely.
a fun team.
Absolutely.
Yes, they are a very fun team. Next up, I'm not gonna lie, I'm unsure who I really, really like here. There's one program that stands out to me because they've got some really fun talent on offense. I'm not sure how much I like them.
Is it the program that has a Amazon Prime documentary show?
I'm actually not familiar, to be honest. It's the team I'm thinking is Texas Tech. Is that the team that's got
I was alluding
Amazon
to
Prime?
Coach Prime, but yeah,
Yeah, definitely not. I'm totally out on him. No, I'm gonna go with Texas Tech and Joey McGuire. They're a sleeper team this year. I'm not ready to say they're gonna compete for the conference, but they're absolutely bowling, and they're absolutely a team that I anticipate is going to be a tough out for some of the better teams in the Big 12. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but an example, if they play, I don't know, Oklahoma State this year, I don't think Oklahoma State is going to come into that game with the thought that they're going to dominate. They've got a star tight end in Jalen Conyers, who came from Arizona State and last year underachieved, but that had a lot more to do with the Arizona State offense than it did Jalen Conyers by himself. He's a beast. He's a stud. He's playing on Sundays. Where I'm really excited, and in a Big 12 media poll, I voted this kid to be the Big 12 newcomer of the year, and that's 5-star freshman receiver Micah Hudson. This dude is going to be a beast. And matching him with Jalen Conyers on offense, and their running back is coming back too, and I can't remember his name. They've got weapons on offense, and it'll be very difficult for Joey McGuire to screw that up. But this is a team that, in theory, should be a very, very quality football team this year. They're no worse than a 6-win team. Depending on their schedule, again, I don't have it in front of me, they could be an 8-win team, maybe even a little bit better. The offense by itself is going to be absolute dynamite. And they, as long as everything clicks, it's all in theory, but they could be one of the higher scoring teams in the Big 12 this year. And it'll depend on their defense, which I will admit I don't know a ton about, but the offense itself gets me really, really excited.
You talk to, like, you'll get this more. You're in the Big 12. You talk to a lot of the Texas guys. All the Texas guys, they all bash each other. If you talk to all the people from Baylor, TCU, Houston, they're going to bash Texas Tech, say like, hey, this is the team that always fails when expectations are high. They are a team that always underachieves. If you're talking about Joey McGuire specifically, Joey McGuire was part of that building that Baylor team that Matt Rule had, and also part of building that Baylor team that Dave Aranda had there. And he has a lot of high school Texas coaching vibe, connections. And that was kind of the biggest reason Texas Tech hired him, is that this guy came in to recruit, and he has, and the fact that you don't have Texas, the fact you don't have Oklahoma in this conference anymore, Texas Tech, go ahead and look at the recruiting rankings since Joey McGuire's gotten there. They are at the top part of the conference. They are competing with some of the best. I mean, they're not like a top 10 class or anything like that, but they are like definitely always going to be a 1 or 2 best recruiting class in the conference under him. Again, kind of what I was alluding to at the beginning when I started talking is, can this team put it all together? Can they have correct health at the quarterback position, which kind of held them back the last few years with Tyler Shuck, the fact that he wasn't healthy and was always kind of in and out. Because this team does have talent, and it's kind of, can they put it all together? Because this is other team too. If you talk about that talent, actually if it does get put together and they do kind of just come out and live up to their full potential, they're another team that could compete for the conference title. So that was the exact pick I had there too. All right. I think I'm choosing between 2 guys that, or at least one guy that was in the Pac-12 last year, and one guy that got hired by a Pac-12 school that is now a Big 12 school, which if you're talking about projections, that guy might be a little bit too low on this list. But I'm going to go for probably the most controversial coach on this list. I'm going to go with Coach Prime. I'm going to go with Deion Sanders. If you want to talk about Coach Prime, I have my criticisms of him, and I've battled a lot of the people on the YouTube streets about this. And if you want to talk about the bad, let's talk about the bad. I don't think that the team building strategy that he is doing now, where he's like, hey, I'm going to pump in 40 new transfers again this year, and I'm not going to recruit high school at all, and we're still going to have like 50 new guys. I'm going to fire basically my entire coaching staff. I'm going to get Pat Shurmur, who the reason he was available for hire in November is for a reason, because no one thinks Pat Shurmur is a good coach, even in the NFL. He's kind of going with this approach now where it's like, hey, I'm going to have a bunch of NFL people. We're going to kind of run this team like an NFL team. I don't agree with his team building strategy, but if we're kind of going with the spirit of this list, there is a world where if Deion Sanders recruited and tried to recruit high schoolers the way that guys like Jim Harbaugh did, like Ryan Day did. Okay, how about this? If you don't want to compare him to like the top guys in the sport, how about just like the middle road guys in the sport? How about like, like somebody like Neil Brown or even like Lance Leipold? If he tried a little bit more in recruiting, made more home visits, Deion Sanders, like he's getting 5 stars without even trying. He's getting 4 stars without even trying. If he actually put in more effort, he could easily have like a top 20, top 15, top 10 recruiting class at Colorado. The only problem is, and the reason he's not been taken higher, is because I think both of us are kind of out on his current team building strategy, but I still have hope that maybe he might get a wake up call at some point where it's like, hey, maybe I need to adjust my strategy for how I'm building this out here. Because I do think Colorado is going to give him a little bit, a lot more rope and a lot more leash than maybe other coaches at other schools. And I think that works into his advantage. Again, we'll see how the team building strategy goes this year. I think they could flirt with bowl contention this year, but they do have the 13th toughest schedule in the country. I think that's something that they're like, oh, a lot of people are like, oh, they're in the Big 12 now, man. It's going to be an easier schedule. There's no Oregon. It's like, okay, you guys have to play a pretty tough out of conference schedule. You got Nebraska again. You got North Dakota State. You got Colorado State that's going to be coming for your heads again. And then you got a bunch of tough teams in the Big 12. It's not going to be an easy road. And I'm skeptical in the continuity of this team. But if you're just doing this kind of like the nature of projection and getting high end talent, like the potential for Deion Sanders as a recruiter is far and beyond just probably anyone in the entire sport. So I'm going with Deion.
Fun fact: Deion was last place in the Big 12 last year, or Pac-12 last year, and he was a last-second drive against ASU away from going winless in the Pac-12.
And if TCU did better clock management and tried to run out the ball, they would have lost that game too.
Yep, this is a team that Dan Lanning at Oregon put it perfectly. They're a social media team. But with that being said, he recruits, and he recruits very, very well. In theory, that's a team that should be talented enough. It's just a matter of can he actually coach them. Going to my next pick, I am stuck between two guys. I think I'm going to give the edge here to a little bit of projection, mainly because this is a easier schedule for them, and he's had previous success before he got to this program last year, and it absolutely flopped. I'm going with Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati. And don't get me wrong, I do not think Cincinnati is going to finish very well this year. I won't say they're last place in the Big 12, but they're not going to be one of the better teams. But the good news is they're not playing Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas, or Arizona this year. That's about as favorable as it's going to get. But you're coming off a 3-win year. And this is a team that isn't the most talented in the world. It's going to be very difficult for them. I know they have players. I believe their center is someone that is well liked. I might be confusing him with someone else. I'm pretty sure they have a good center. But I like Satterfield. And he should be able to get them turned around. Obviously, they are not the team they were a handful of years ago when they made it to the college football playoff. You look at all the talent that was on that team that is no longer there. It was always going to be a rebuild for them. But I do think that Satterfield is a very underappreciated coach. It's just a matter of turning that team around. And I don't think that this is the year they do it. But he is the right guy for the future of that program. It was between him and somebody who has been a head coach at his program for quite a bit. As we've said many a times, this is definitely a projection pick for me, but I like Satterfield quite a bit.
Scott Satterfield, I don't think there has been a single nice word that has been said on this podcast about Scott Satterfield. His time at Louisville, again, sometimes I kind of, take some of this stuff with like a grain of salt. When I talked to like my Louisville guy, he was like, oh, good riddance, Scott Satterfield. We're all happy with Jeff Brom. But then I talked to my guy at Purdue. My guy at Purdue is like, good riddance to Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom goes and takes his team to like a 12-0 season and kind of like out of nowhere. So Scott Satterfield, I agree with the potential. They were probably one of the worst teams in the Big 12 last year. We could see some improvement year 2. They don't have Emory Jones this year, which I think is probably a good thing. They did have like some nice pieces. They had nice pieces on their team last year. It just seemed like overall their talent wasn't the best. So if you believe in his development, you believe in just kind of like the ways that he can build a program, get talent to the program, there's optimism. But his time at Louisville was always kind of like they just always seem to play in like a lot of these like really crazy games. It would be like a weird like ECC like Thursday night game or Friday night game that I'd be watching. And I learned not to bet on Louisville Scott Satterfield, and I'm trying to, if I am going to bet on Cincinnati Scott Satterfield, usually bet against him. So I did not have him at 13. I actually had him at 15. I'm going to go with the guy I did have at 13. Again,
It's a
and,
reach.
and this is the one on this list that this is the guy that has the least amount of like high level coaching experience, and this is Brent Brennan, the head coach for the Arizona Wildcats, your rival. And this is mostly a projection because this is a Arizona team that when Jed Fish took over, I can't remember what year exactly he took over. Right, it was like 2021, 2020, I believe. This was a program that was just absolutely in the gutter. They were left for dead. The Kevin Sumlin era was an absolute disaster. Jed Fish did a very good job of bringing in talent to Arizona, developing talent at Arizona. You just talked about guys like Noah Fafita, the quarterback this year. Their wide receiver, I believe, is a T-Mac. Their wide receiver this year is going to be one of the best in
You
the
just
country.
call him T Mac, yeah. I
Yeah.
can't pronounce his first name.
Yeah. Uh, they have like still some of the best talent. I know they lost like a good amount of talent from last year's team, but a lot of this good talent that Jed Fish brought there and developed is still around. And I'm a little confused where I guess like the guy, this is one of those things where I chalk it up to the guys at Vegas know more than me. But I feel like if Jed Fish was still the coach of this team's over under win total would probably be like at 9.5. Since getting down to Brent Brennan, it is at 7.5. But you're talking about a first year coach that can win potentially 7. If he wins 7 games, it's below the over under win total. I just kind of like that as a good starting point for him there in Arizona and Tucson. And I kind of like the projection. Again, it's kind of like if Jed Fish would have left in November, let's say, versus February or whenever it was, he probably wouldn't be the head coach. So maybe that's a little bit of a downgrade here on him, but he's here now, so I kind of like the projections of him. And if he knows how to run a program, build a program, which he did have a little bit of success at San Jose State, which when he took over wasn't doing the best, and by the time he left, he had them as a pretty solid team. So I'm going with Brent Brennan there.
He's got a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of talent that's coming back. T Mac, Fafita. They brought in some running back from Ole Miss. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. They're really excited about. They've got Jigamanu at linebacker. They've got the big corner Takario Davis. They're having to replace Ephesians Brysock, but you still have Takario Davis. They got the offensive lineman Jonah S. I don't know how to pronounce his last name either. There's a lot of talent, but you're replacing a lot of talent, and you're replacing a very, very good head coach. Won't be easy. It's still a talented team. With my last pick, as much as it pains me to do it, I do have to go Kalani Sitake at BYU. He's just been there a long time and had more success than he's had no success. This is not going to be a good year for BYU. Their quarterback situation is just an absolute mess. But you still have to take the guy who has more proven success than the guy that I really want to take. Right now, it's Kalani. We could probably put him higher, honestly. But I think what he's got going against him is this is going to be a bad season. They're coming off a losing season last year. He's someone that you have to believe in until further notice, but it's not going to be an easy season for him. If they overachieve this year, it's because of his ability to be a good head coach.
This is I would have taken him here too. This is a interesting pick because BYU was an independent school for basically the entire 2010s. They had a
Right.
good stretch there with Bronco Mendenhall. Then Kalani Sitake takes over. They had a few good years. It's kind of like the best year was like that Zach Wilson year, but that was even a weird year because they're kind of like scheduling like different random teams all the time. If you talk to, I believe he still does Locked On podcast for you, Jake Hatch. I was talking about him at one
Mm-hmm.
point about Kalani Sitake and potentially him leaving, or certain things like that. And I think probably the biggest benefit, and this was a few years back, by the way, this is when, like, the height of the Kalani Sitake era. And this is kind
Sure.
of like a thing he was saying. He's like, hey, we're a little nervous about it because being an independent school, they weren't necessarily had the access of money and security for money that you would be at a certain power conference school. And now that BYU is getting that Big 12 money, which, yeah, sure, isn't like Big 10 money, isn't SEC money, these is a good thing, a good opportunity for BYU to kind of like improve a lot of their facilities, improve a lot of like things that were probably outdated when they were an independent school. So if you want to do projections on Kalani Sitake, just the fact that the BYU getting into the Big 12, if you give him time, you should see some results here. So I would have had that too, but I do think that they were a team last year that struggled. I was maybe I just kind of really didn't know what to really think of them. I thought they're maybe going to be a terrible team last year. They were maybe a little better than I thought, and this year it looks like another rebuilding year for them. So, all right, I'll take your guy.
Unfortunately,
I'll take your guy. It's okay. It's okay. Hopefully, if we do this next year, he's going to be going up the list. This is Kenny
he will.
Dillingham. He is the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils. Kenny Dillingham, we first found out about him when he was the offensive coordinator at Oregon, revitalized Bo Nix's career, got him drafted by Sean Payton. And Sean Payton's going to have to go through the Bo Nix experience now. Kenny Dillingham can take credit for that. He, even though last year was kind of rocky, has shown the ability to even get guys like a Jaden Rashada to come to his school, has shown the ability to have talent. And if you're just doing projections on Kenny Dillingham, I was reading this today. He's 32 years old. He is the youngest Power Four head coach. And I think we don't say this enough a lot of times when we're talking about head coaches. Sometimes head coaches can get better. Sometimes head coaches can improve. And I think if you're going to just be looking optimistically at Kenny Dillingham going forward, he's a young coach. If Arizona State gives him enough of a leash, I think he can do some good things for your program.
And they are definitely all in on the youth movement with him. He's super young. He's super innovative. He helped turn Bo Nix around at Oregon. He was at Florida State briefly. He was at Memphis briefly. He was at Auburn briefly. He's got a lot of experience with very good teams. He's built a very, very solid staff at Arizona State. But at the end of the day, they're still a rebuilding program. They're coming off a 3-win year. You have got to temper your expectations. We spent the first part of this podcast talking about how high I am on him, but if you are ranking and giving a very unbiased take of the Big 12, Kenny Dillingham has the most to prove right now. He's still got a team that's got a ways to go, but he gets the most out of his guys. He has set a culture. They are absolutely trending in the right direction. It's just a matter of getting them to that point. But year 2, it's still tough. You're not going to be able to really get a good read on him until year 3, I would say, to get 3 recruiting classes under his belt. He has recruited very well. He has these guys believing that they can beat anybody. And I mean, like we said earlier, he was probably a healthy offensive line away from beating Washington in Seattle last year. If they can build on that, he's going to be a much higher head coach at this time next year when me and you are power ranking them again. It's just a matter of proving it. But I'm still a fan of Kenny Dillingham. I have to be as unbiased as I possibly can. For what it's worth, I would have taken him ahead of Brent Brennan, but there's probably a little bit of bias there if I can be totally honest.
Well, again, I mean,
But I'm out on Brent Brennan.
Again, sometimes it's all about kind of the situation you're walking into. Brent Brennan walking into a very good situation. Kenny Dillingham, when he took over, he's taken over the Herm Edwards mess. There's all kinds of like recruiting investigations going on. So he's kind of like, the canvas is blank and he's trying to build his own structure. He's trying to put the bricks together and trying to put things in order. And, we'll see, man. We'll see, man. We'll sky's the limit. Let's go
Yes.
through this again, just to kind of go through back the order. You took Kyle Whittingham. I took Mike Gundy. You took Lance Leipold. I took Chris Kleiman. You took my guy, Matt Campbell. I went with the Gus Bus, Gus Malzahn. You went with Sonny Dykes. I went with Dave Aranda. You went with Willie Fritz. I went with Neil Brown. Then we had Joey McGuire that you took. I took the controversial Coach Prime at what's that, 12, I believe, if I'm keeping count. Then you took Scott Satterfield. I took Brett Brennan. You took Kalani Sitake. And then I took Kenny Dillingham to end it. So, hey, man, pretty fun.
There you go.
At the end, we are going to go with the MacBook camera to finish this. This is almost perfect timing. This is almost like a little bit of a buzzer. My fake producer that doesn't exist is saying wrap it up. So, Richie, with all that being done, we talked Arizona State, we talked head coaches. Can you tell us where we can view all of your content and where we can follow you as we are entering this college football season? That's just a mere few weeks away.
We are right around the corner. I couldn't be more excited. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter, it's Richie Brads with a Z 36. If you're interested in some Arizona State Sun Devils content where I can be very unbiased to the point where YouTube commenters want to attack me, but I can also be very biased to where people would probably get upset with me, you can follow Locked On Sun Devils on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcast. You can also follow on Twitter at LO_Sun Devils. I am looking forward to this season, though. It's going to be a blast. And I think that we're going to be in for a lot of surprises in the Big 12 this year. This is a volatile conference, but I think it's a good kind of volatile.
Awesome, man. Thanks as always for coming on. Thank you for watching this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. If you liked what you saw here today, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That is the best thing that you can do to support the show, and it costs you absolutely $0. And if you want to listen to me and Richie preview Arizona State's football season this year, you can go ahead and hit that video in the description below. You can also probably hit the video link that is on your screen right now, or you can check out the rest of the Sports Detective Podcast channel page. And thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.